This is The Process Shot. I'm Michael. I'm stuck in a haunted movie theater, and I've seen Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe, a Western fantasy comedy from 1964 directed by George Pal. In a small little town in Arizona, an old and eccentric Chinese traveler stops by the local paper to put up an ad for his circus, promising dazzling sideshows featuring mythical creatures and figures of ancient legend. The townsfolk are delighted by this, though a few are more preoccupied by a public vote on the horizon that may see every last bit of town property fall into the hands of a local tycoon, who, unlike the others, is aware that a railroad is coming through, which means a lot of money. As Lao's circus gets underway, however, a number of the locals come to learn a bit more about themselves with the help of the various attractions. And not only that, but what exactly they might lose by selling all their land, perhaps something worth more than whatever any railroad might bring. There's a bit more to the story, of course, with its share of smaller character story arcs as well. Though, obviously, those do more to set up and develop those characters rather than contribute to the larger storyline. There is still enough that the movie hardly comes off as if it's neglecting them, not to mention that it even has enough room for some minor characters to get in some time for themselves, though they're seemingly there more for comic relief or to build up the circus environment itself. In fact, Dr. Lowe himself is pretty much the linchpin of the film and the story, placing him in almost every scene in one way or another, and making it a point that there is more to him than first impressions would suggest. The circus itself becomes a place where the preconceptions and notions of the townsfolk are challenged, and where one's personal flaws or self-denials are directly confronted. Lowe himself outright makes these challenges in his actions and performance within the town, portraying himself not only as an eccentric who can only speak in broken sentences with a strong accent, but also as a more refined and eloquent speaker, clearly in full control and able to switch between the two at will. By the end of the story, the question is raised as to whether or not Dr. Lowe had simply chosen this town as a stop for his circus by complete chance, or if perhaps he knew of its problems and how exactly to solve them. Speaking of performance, lead actor Tony Randall does very well as Dr. Lowe, despite the part where he's a white guy portraying a Chinese man. The 60s were a different time, I suppose. He also portrays the many other circus attractions, hence the film's title, bringing a wildly different approach with each new figure. I honestly don't think you'd be aware of these multiple roles if the opening credits didn't reveal it. The rest of the cast falls in more with whatever role they're playing within the greater story, and unfortunately they come through a bit weaker as a result. The rest of the movie's production is almost along the same lines, excelling whenever Lau is involved and pulling back when he's not. I imagine it's more to do with how much activity actually occurs within the circus, whether it be back and forth dialogue between patrons and exhibits, or whenever true action is happening, from stage performances to a wild dance sequence, all of which the film's cinematography captures with a great sense of fantasy and imagination. Editing also keeps pace with these events, as well as blending in special effects work in the case of a few circus attractions. Again, these sorts of elements become a bit more muted outside of the circus, which I can see as being intentional choices that contrast the wonderment with the town's plainness. Overall, the movie makes the circus itself become as much of an attraction for the viewing audience as it is for the townsfolk. For them, Dr. Lau brings a wholly new perspective to an important, life-changing decision they were ready to think nothing else about. But for us, it's, well, less extreme than that, I suppose. Seven Faces of Dr. Lau. George Pal, 1964. 4.5 stars. I'd recommend giving it a watch for sure. That's it for me. If you like this review, leave it a like. If you have something to add, leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. I don't think I've ever been to a circus. I doubt they're anything like in the movies anymore anyways. I blame animal rights activists.